why I'm not in Afghanistan right now, and there's just so much news on the immigration front. We're going to talk about it all on today's Hot Zone.
This is the Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hello, folks. I'm supposed to be in Afghanistan right now. I know I told you all last week that I would be reporting from Afghanistan this week, and here I am in my home studio in Panama. So let me explain exactly what happened. Sometimes these kinds of things just don't work out. When you have a big trip like this planned, there are so many moving parts involved in embedding with U.S. troops in Afghanistan that I've been literally working on this for months, trying to line everything up so that I could go there and get the real story about what's going on with the 17,000 men and women from the United States and coalition countries who are still there in Operation Resolute Support, and what they're doing in Afghanistan right now. There's actually a lot going on in Afghanistan that's not making the news. And so I want to go and cover it. And I still plan to do that. But now it's going to get postponed probably until the first week of August. The reason for that is simply that I have to get a visa to get into Afghanistan, but I can't apply for my visa until I know the dates that I'm traveling. And I don't know the dates that I'm traveling until I coordinate with the U.S. military to find out exactly when they can support a visit from a journalist. And so I've been going back and forth with those guys in the public affairs realm, trying to figure out when I'm going to be able to come over and hang out with the troops. And there were a couple of, okay, you can come this date, and then they changed their minds, and then, oh, wait, we're going to be, changing to a different unit that week, and so you can't come. And bottom line is, I didn't get final dates from the military, even though I've been literally working on this since like February. I didn't get final dates from the military about when I could come until the last week of May. Well, then that means I have to buy my tickets to go to Afghanistan, and I have to get a visa to get into Afghanistan. But I can't get the visa until I already have the tickets. So I buy my tickets to Afghanistan, and I go to apply for my visa. Well, I had to leave the United States and come back to Panama. And there's no consulate for Afghanistan in Panama. When you apply for an Afghan visa, you have to literally mail your passport to the Afghan embassy in Washington, D.C., and it takes them about a week to stamp your passport and give it back to you. Well, I didn't have a week because I had to come back to Panama. So I was looking for options. One of my options, actually the only one I could find, was going to the embassy in Dubai, the Afghan embassy in Dubai, where ostensibly they can give you an Afghan visa same day. So I had a long layover in Dubai, worked it out where I could get there. I arrive in Dubai at like 6:40 in the morning. I could get in a taxi, go to the Afghan visa, turn in my passport, and hopefully get my visa back the same day. And check their website. They were open that day. It showed they were open, and that from what everybody said, I could get my visa back in just a matter of hours. Well, I was calling to make sure that that was the case, and finally got a hold of somebody in the Afghan embassy through Facebook, the Dubai embassy there. And they said, oh, well, that particular day we're closed because of the Eid holiday, which is the end of Ramadan. And I was like, oh, great. So I picked the 1 week where they're closed. So I tried to change my ticket to be there the day before that, because again, everything from the website, it looked like, okay, they'd be open on Thursday, not Friday. Try to get my ticket changed so I could be there a day early and spend an extra day in Dubai getting that taken care of. And wouldn't you know, then they come back and say, oh, by the way, we happen to be closed all week for Eid. It's like Christmas, I think. And so I'm just out of luck. I can't get my visa. If you can't get a visa, you can't get into Afghanistan. They won't even let you on the plane. And if you can't get in Afghanistan, then you can't embed with U.S. troops, et cetera, et cetera. So then I had to back all the way up and start all over again and go back to the military and say, all right, when can I get in? This is just a little peek behind the curtain, I guess, for you of what it takes to do this job. There's just a lot of coordination when you're going into those kind of non-permissive environments. So the military is like, okay, well, you can come first week of August, but you can only stay 4 days with this particular unit that I want to go to, my son's unit, and we'll have to get back to you on whether or not we can find any other units that can take you. Well, who wants to go all the way to Afghanistan for 4 days? I'm staying a week at least, probably 2. And if I can't get in with the military, I may just have to travel around Afghanistan on my own. I've done it before, and there are some very interesting things to see and report on in Afghanistan that don't involve the U.S. military. So we'll just have to wait and see. In the meantime, there has been so much going on along the U.S. southern border. I'm half tempted to just make an entire podcast, a whole series of podcasts just about the immigration issue, because I could literally make a full-time job out of reporting on all the stuff that's going on the U.S. southern border. First of all, let's talk about We Build the Wall. Brian Colfage is an Air Force veteran, an amputee, and he started a GoFundMe essentially to raise money to build the wall. You've probably seen some of this on the news. We've been talking about it since before it was on the news. If you'll go back and look at some of the earlier podcasts where we talked to the United Constitutional Patriots and that sort of thing. Long and the short of it is they actually are getting it done. They are right at Monument 1 where Texas and New Mexico come together on the U.S.-Mexican border, and they've already built over a half mile of wall. Check this out.
From last night, we came up another 168 feet. You can see the wet concrete. We finished at 11:30 last night, reset the 4 349 cat excavators with 5 panels each. We are 39 feet from completion of the first half mile of the wall, going up at 31% grade. You can see all the men are doing a great, efficient job. The manpower and dedication of Fisher and Job, it's just unsurpassable. We're working 24 hours a day, around the clock. The chess match of moving men, machinery, concrete, and trucks up severe slopes has been very safe and very efficient. We're 39 feet away, and we expect to be here by 2 o'clock today.
So Foreman Mike cracks me up. That guy, he's as America as it gets, isn't he? And obviously they're making progress, and they're doing it much, much cheaper than the U.S. government does it. They're doing it much faster than the U.S. government does it. And it just goes to show that really building the wall is not so much of an issue when it comes to either cost or difficulty. It is absolutely possible for us to seal our southern border with a physical barrier. There is no question. And any question that was out there, anybody who says that it's too expensive or too difficult, I think We Build the Wall just proved them wrong. Just is they're the proof that you need to show to your liberal friends and say, look, the wall can happen. It is happening. And where it goes up, immigration, illegal immigration at least, goes way down. Now, we're seeing massive increases, 30% every month in the number of people coming across the border. There is a gold rush on from Central America coming up into the United States right now. There are literally millions, if not tens of millions, of people who will gladly leave their country of origin, whether that's Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, whether that's Cuba, whether that's Venezuela, whether that's China, Nepal, Bangladesh, Cameroon, Ghana, you name it. There are countries around the world who are, their people will very, very happily leave their countries and come to the United States. And they're doing it for one reason, really, and one reason only. You could talk about the violence or the poverty in their own countries, but violence and poverty in their own countries might motivate them to leave their country, but it's not an impetus to go to the United States per se. If you live in Cameroon and it's violent in Cameroon. Yeah, there's war in Cameroon. It's very violent, especially if you're an English speaker there. But the United States is a long way from Cameroon, and it's a very arduous, dangerous, costly journey. And so if you don't like Cameroon, you can pretty easily go to somewhere nearer like Equatorial Guinea or Senegal or Cote d'Ivoire or someplace like that, where there isn't war, where it's much closer to your culture, it's much closer so that you can go home when the war is over in Cameroon. And the question is, well, why don't they do that? Well, they don't do that. They come to the United States. They're just absolutely flooding the U.S. southern border for one reason and one reason only, and that's because we give away money. And anybody who says we don't either is ignorant or they're lying, because the truth is we give away lots and lots of money to people who come into our country. Take a look at this short clip from the Center for Immigration Studies about that very issue.
Do immigrants consume a lot of welfare? The short answer to that question is yes. Here's the best way to think about it. In the United States today, we spend hundreds of billions of dollars on anti-poverty programs. And because immigrants are more likely to be poor compared to natives, immigrants are also more likely to participate in those programs. In fact, 51% of immigrant-headed households use some kind of anti-poverty benefit, whether it be Medicaid, food stamps, housing vouchers, etc. This compares to 30% of native households. And in terms of dollars and cents, immigrants consume about $6,200 worth of welfare per year, compared to $4,400 for natives. Now, importantly, this does not mean that immigrants are lazy. In fact, immigrants have high rates of work. Immigrants consume welfare simply because they live in a society, ours, that redistributes a lot of money to the working poor. Now, why do some people insist that immigrants do not use a lot of welfare? One argument you'll sometimes hear is that we should not count the welfare used by the US-born children of immigrants. That is a seriously mistaken view. Parents have a legal obligation to provide food and medical care and housing to their children. If the taxpayers step in and do that for them, that is a benefit to the parent. It frees up money for other priorities. And if we're talking about immigrants, that could mean remittances sent to the home countries. Now, maybe immigrants will pay us back later if their children grow up and become taxpayers themselves. Well, it's not likely. The most sophisticated estimates suggest that low-skill immigrants will remain a net fiscal burden for decades to come. But let's be honest, nobody can predict the future. We have enough trouble budgeting 5 years into the future, let alone decades. Why not minimize the long-term risk by reforming our immigration system today?
Okay, so there are a lot of migrants who qualify for various welfare programs. And as I've said before, they're very, very good at gaming the system and collecting money in lots of different ways, more than we actually intend to even give away. They do that by, let's say, a married couple registering as two single people. They do that by registering in more than one state. They do that by lots of different ways. And when we help them with their food bill, with their housing, all that sort of thing, much of the value, that doesn't mean that they're not working. As you saw here in that video, it doesn't mean they're not working. What that means is that they have more money in their pocket that they can then send back to their home of origin. And that's where we get into the issue of remittance taxes. Now, frankly, I don't know why Donald Trump has not already imposed a remittance tax on money that's leaving the United States. There are hundreds of billions of dollars every year that are being sent out of the U.S., sent from the U.S. by migrants who are sending it home to family members or whatever. And that is actually funding the next wave of migrants that are coming north. Imagine how expensive it is if you're in Cameroon and it's literally probably 15,000 miles of travel for you to get from Cameroon physically and get your body to the U.S. southern border. That's probably close to 15,000 miles of travel. It's 10,000 miles anyway, just straight line distance as a crow flies. And so you have to either take an airplane. Many of them are. Many of them are flying, and they fly to Ecuador because Ecuador doesn't have any visa requirements. They take buses from there all the way up. Many of those buses are paid for by the countries that they're traveling through because those countries don't want them. So we have tens of thousands of Africans and Middle Easterners and Asians and people from Bangladesh and all over, Nepal, India, coming to the Western Hemisphere with the express intent of getting into the United States. And the only way they can possibly do that is because there's an infrastructure in place for them to help them get to the U.S. southern border. So they can't fly into Mexico because they can't get a visa for Mexico. But they don't need a visa for Ecuador. So they fly down there, and then they start taking buses. They get money sent to them from relatives in the United States. They get money sent to them from elsewhere. And the government of Panama puts them on a bus and sends them north to the Costa Rican border. The government of Costa Rica puts them on a bus and sends them north to the Nicaraguan border, and so on and so forth, all the way into the United States. If Donald Trump really wants to stop this problem, the barrier obviously is key, but he's also got to address the chain migration that takes place because of remittances. Now, Stephen Camarada is a researcher at the Center for Immigration Studies, and he's done a lot of research on this. He's done some very good work on it, and I'm going to try to get him on the podcast here in the next couple of days. Now, he's also done a lot of reports on how many migrants there are in the United States, and it's a whole lot more than the media number that you've heard for literally more than a decade of 11 to 12 million people. It's more like 45 or 45 million people, and so take a look at what he has to say about that.
In a new report for the Center for Immigration Studies, myself and a colleague looked at recently released Census Bureau data and found that there were nearly 45 million immigrants, or foreign-born people, living in the United States. That's the highest number in American history. As a share of the population, or percentage, about 1 out of every 7 U.S. residents is an immigrant, and that is the highest in the last 107 years. We also found that the biggest areas of growth in terms of the number of immigrants were from immigrants from Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America, other than Mexico. Interestingly, the number of immigrants from Mexico actually fell in the last few years, but it was entirely offset by a dramatic growth in immigrants from the rest of Latin America. Now, we all know that immigration impacts a wide variety of issues in the United States. It impacts our politics and our culture. It has an impact on schools and healthcare. And what these new numbers indicate is that a country really does need a robust debate about whether current policy makes sense. That is, whether it makes sense to allow so many people into the country every year.
So look, this problem has gone beyond concerning at this point to like set your hair on fire and run around in circles screaming, that kind of problem. And it's not because we don't want migrants in our country. It's not because we have any problem with people from Cameroon. What we are seeing is the largest mass migration in history, bar none, point, period, end of story. It's not just people coming to the United States, it's people coming into Europe as well, but any country that gives away a lot of money to its poor is going to see a lot more poor people showing up at their front door. That's all there is to it. There are migrants even still flooding into Europe. Again, it's not making the news a whole lot, but they're rescuing people every week out of the Mediterranean there and taking them to Italy, taking them to Cyprus, taking them to Malta, taking them to Spain. And these people, again, are coming from very desperate poverty in places like Cameroon. And again, we can't blame them. You can't blame people for wanting a better life. But what you can do is discourage them by saying, we're not going to steal money from our tax-paying citizens, people who have contributed to and paid into this system. And we're not going to take their money and give it to people who have not contributed to and not paid into this system in their millions, and to the point where they will absolutely bankrupt any country that doesn't put a stop to it. So Mexico is starting to feel the heat because Donald Trump made a big deal about slapping tariffs on Mexico. And lo and behold, they all of a sudden are starting to get serious about stopping people on their southern border. Why aren't they just stopping people on their northern border with the United States? Well, because Mexico knows it is not sustainable to have hundreds of thousands of migrants from Central America staying in Mexico. Mexico doesn't want them because they know it's not sustainable. They can't sustain that. And they are going to suffer if they don't stop the flow at their southern border, which is now what they're starting to do. So they're sending something like 6,000 federal troops to the southern border of Mexico. And we will see, I would love to get down there very soon and do some more reporting on this, but we will see whether or not that makes any kind of difference on the Mexican southern border as these troops show up. And people are still, even right now, coming across that river from Guatemala into Mexico. So we'll see if they put a stop to that. All right, that's all we have time for today, folks. Thanks you for being a part of the Hot Zone. I hope if you're enjoying the podcast that you'll go back and look at some of our previous episodes. We've done a lot of work reporting on some of these hot button issues from very dangerous crisis zones around the world. Go back to February, the end of February, and look at some of the footage and some of the reports that I sent out of Syria at the final fight from last stand of ISIS. Go back and look at some of the stuff that I've sent from Cucuta, Colombia, in my many trips there over the last several months. And I hope you'll share this podcast with your friends. It is growing. We broke, I think, 155 the other day in news and politics podcasts in the United States, which I'm totally pumped about. And so we're making progress, and we're getting more viewers every day, and we appreciate that. We are going to do things that not only bring you the inside scoop about what's going on in crisis zones around the world, but we're going to allow you, through the magic of social media and through the new kind of technology that we have at our fingertips, we're going to allow you to reach through the camera into the lives of the people that we are reporting on and change their lives for the better. We're going to let you make a difference in the news. And so in that way, it's not going to be quite so depressing to hear about all the mayhem that happens everywhere around the globe. So thanks for being a part of it. I'm Chuck Holton, and you've been watching The Hot Zone.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.